7:02, we'll call the meeting to order. All members are present. We'll begin with the transmitting of Treasury warrants 46, 46A, 47, and 47A. Do we have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Made and seconded. All in favor? It's unanimous. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes of March 26, 2012, April 9, 2012, and April 23, 2012. Do we have a motion?
Motion to accept the minutes as read, as written.
I'll second.
Made and seconded. Anything further? All in favor? It's unanimous. First appointment this evening, scheduled for 7 o'clock, is with Lewis M. Ross, attorney for Deutsch Williams, and it's regarding the acquisition of 9 Cross Street property. And Attorney Ross is here. Have a seat. I know that you've been the primary point of contact for Deutsch Williams from the get-go on this. If you could just give a quick outline of how we got to where we are tonight and the primary purpose for the agenda item.
Yes, I would love to be able to do that for the board. Article 22 of the annual town meeting warrant, 2012 annual town meeting, the town voted to authorize the selectmen to acquire about 20 acres of land at 9 Cross Street, and that being the will of town meeting, we have taken the steps necessary to allow the town to consummate that purchase, and I'm here before you to ask the selectmen if they would like to do so, and if so, to sign the acceptance of the deed and other closing documents to allow the town to purchase that property.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board?
I'll just say, Mr. Chairman, I think this is a great day for the town of Wilmington. We're looking to, feels the whole board and the manager. I think everyone's done a really great job. As the town manager stated, this property was going to go for over $3 million at one time. And Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but we got a great deal on it through the negotiations of the town manager, and I think this is a great thing for the board, and I know the board has been pushing for this, and it's a great day. It really is. I'm going to be paying it in full. Or the townspeople, I should say, the taxpayers will pay for it in full. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I agree.
I think it's all been said. I think the fact that we're able to do this without being able to take it from monies that we already have in our possession is key, and I'm looking forward to executing on the document, so thank you for being here.
Yeah, me too. This is there are a few occasions sitting as a member of this board where I feel like we're really doing something quite remarkably positive for the community. And this is one of those nights. I'm very proud of the action we're about to take here tonight. And I want to assure all residents that the diligence of the town administration and with your assistance, we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's. We have had inspections of the property. We've had positive documents to that effect. And I have all the assurances of Mr. Kara and all the employees of the town and our council that this is the right move to make. So I will be very happy to be signing it.
And before entertaining a motion from the board, I'd like to make one point and then go to the audience. The point being that if the board, or I think when the board votes to accept the deed this evening, that'll be kept in escrow by our attorneys, waiting to the closing date of June 6th.
It is
Is that right?
closing.
Closing date's June 6th, at which time council will make sure that title is still good and clear and marketable the way it was when they last did their research. So with that said, any questions or comments from the audience? Hearing none, do we have a motion from the board?
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. Anything further? All in favor? It's unanimous?
You want to explain what they're
Sure.
signing, and I'll
Sure.
give them what they should have.
In front of the board tonight, what you have for closing documents is a deed that we are asking the board to countersign this evening to indicate that you have indeed voted to accept it. It will be attached to the deed and memorialized at the Registry of Deeds. We're asking that you execute a settlement statement which shows the payment of the money from the town to the seller of the property, and also the execute a copy of the purchase and sale agreement that governs the transaction between the town and the seller of the property.
Back to Attorney Ross.
you well?
Yes.
Make sure I give you everything.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Mr. Ross.
Thank you.
Any more questions from the board on this matter?
I think they've all been answered.
Nothing further. Thank
Thanks
you.
again.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Have a good evening.
That's all.
Great.
It not yet being 7:15, the time for our next scheduled appointment, what if we could move to communications?
Mr. Chairman, we have correspondence from the Massachusetts Municipal Association regarding the action taken by the Senate with regard to the state's fiscal year 2013 budget. And as you perhaps know, the Senate did complete its state budget debate and actually ended up voting on the various proposed amendments to the Senate Ways and Means Committee budget proposal. The Senate approved the final 2013 proposed budget at the end of last week. There was a slight increase to the appropriation for regional school transportation, but nothing will change the Senate Ways and Means local aid estimates that we have provided you. So you have a copy of those estimates, and I guess what I would want to point out is that there are some differences between the governor's recommendation as well as the House recommendation. However, the Senate and House are very, very close in many of the particular line items. In terms of the unrestricted general government aid, the governor had recommended $1,951,000. The Senate included the money that was to be held back by the governor, dependent upon whether or not the revenue stream would increase, similar to what happened last year when we got the one-time local aid. The House, however, funded that to $2,103,000. The Senate funded it to $2,105,000 in terms of the town of Wilmington. And again, these are the town of Wilmington figures. And both instances were consistent, actually, with the revised estimate that we made, or with the estimate that we made in fiscal 13. However, if the Senate and the House's version passed, we would be getting an additional $150,000. So that's a demonstration of our conservative budgeting, in that we did not budget the entire amount under general government aid, but instead kept off the one-time aid number. It appears that both the House and Senate, who will be meeting in conference committee, are willing to put that money in at this time and not wait. Where we did fare well was in the Chapter 70 line items. There was an increase in Chapter 70 over the governor's budget by some $37.4 million statewide, guaranteed each community and school district a minimum increase of $40 per student. And it also continued to fund the target share aid, which helps the town of Wilmington. So again, when we look at those numbers and we compare that to the numbers that we originally had for the town of Wilmington, you can see, if you go to the third page, which is entitled Local Aid, you can see how the progression would work. We estimated the same amount that the governor was looking at, and that was the $10,186,107. House Ways and Means and the House budget increased that by about $150,000, but even greater than that was the Senate Ways and Means and ultimately the Senate budget, which increased that number by about $470,000. So none of these numbers are final. They're all preliminary, which is what they say all the time, but none of it is bad news in terms of where the town had made its original estimates. The Senate budget is perhaps the best budget of all in terms of the town of Wilmington because it guarantees the funding for the unrestricted municipal aid by adding the $65 million to the base cherry sheet distribution. It adds the $34.7 million statewide, meaning the increase of about $470,000, $480,000 for the town in local aid under Chapter 70, and also fully funds the sped circuit breaker by adding $29 million. So these are this is a good indication as to the direction the town is headed. The only issue really at this point that we're looking at as a problem is the Chapter 90, which has been delayed in conference committee. The House and the Senate are both in favor of the Chapter 90 money. However, it's tied up with other legislation at this point, so that could be slowed in terms of ultimately getting released. So that's where we stand at this point. I guess the one caution is that the numbers are preliminary. The House and Senate will now meet in conference with the goal of getting a budget done before July 1. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer, but that's where we are.
Yeah, if I may, kind of a procedural question, and I think I've asked it before, but I'll ask it again because it's always a little fuzzy to me, these numbers. We've already established the budget. To your point made earlier, you have a history of establishing a conservative budget planning process and planning style, and that in years past has served us very well when there have been cuts, when the final budget numbers come out of the state. And so we were able to continue to offer the services to the residents in spite of those cuts. Now we find ourselves in a potential situation, if some of these numbers hold true, that we'll have surplus. So if in fact that occurs, how does the surplus get handled if we are able to operate the town's operations based on the budget as submitted, and we find ourselves in the enviable position of having extra income? Do we take on more projects, or do we roll that to the next fiscal budget and budget more tightly for the next year? How do you manage that?
Yeah, that's a determination the town would have to make via a town meeting process, because the money cannot be appropriated except by town meeting action. And we did this at the last town meeting when we appropriated from the one-time aid. We did so to meet gaps in the budget, but we also did so to pay for the purchase of the property from the Baptist Church. Mm-hmm. But generally, and even the additional money that we didn't touch would go into the general fund and inure to free cash. And as you know, and was pointed out, I think by Selectman O'Connell, the purchase of the Yentau Farm, for example, is all from free cash, and that was generated by being conservative in our spending plan and just allowing the any of the excess funds that came in from the state or from any point, whether it's local receipts or in this case last year, the meals tax, which had not been budgeted for. Those are the funds that enable us to make a purchase without going back to the town, without going back to the taxpayers.
Sure, right. Okay, thank you. I appreciate the refresher on the process. Thank you.
So,
Nice job on the budget, once again.
All right, let's resume with our scheduled appointments, and our 7:15 appointment is with Jeffrey M. Hull, Assistant Town Manager, and it's regarding a discussion with Board of Selectmen regarding the position of Town Manager.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to abstain from any conversation, any decisions made here.
Okay.
If you'd like to leave, or just...
From my perspective.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The floor is yours.
Well, first of all, I'd just like to thank the board for giving me this opportunity this evening to interview with you and talk to you about the town manager's position. Certainly this is one of, if not the most important decision that any Board of Selectmen has to make, because the town manager serves at the will of the board, is the chief administrative officer, the chief financial officer, and one of the chief representatives of the town. So the fact that you are willing to give me this opportunity, I greatly appreciate. The fact that the town has only had 3 town managers in the last 45 years, I think speaks volumes not only to the caliber of town managers that have served the town of Wilmington, but it also speaks to the board's endorsement of the town manager form of government, and the fact that the board is comfortable with serving its role as a policy maker and leaving it to the town manager and the administration to implement that policy. So again, I want to extend my true appreciation for this opportunity.
I'm sure that the board has questions and comments. From my perspective, we can fire away with questions and comments, or if you have any comments that you'd like to make in terms of why you think you might be best suited for the position. Does the I should ask the board if the board has any preference in that regard.
I'll just make a quick comment, and, if you want to entertain questions later on, and you're the chairman, whatever direction you choose to take, executive session, if we decide to take a vote, obviously, to make the appointment, then obviously we need to, next step is to discuss a contract. And I just like to say, it was well over a year ago when I was up for re-election in 2011, I was perhaps the first person to mention Jeff as a possible candidate for town manager, obviously during the re-election. And I just didn't see spending $30,000, $40,000 on a nationwide search, looking for somebody, knowing that at the end of the day, I felt strongly in supporting you. It's like anything else. Owning my own business, I'm a firm believer of promoting within. That speaks volumes. I think you only go outside the organization to enhance your business or the town. So I don't think we need to look any further. I'd like to say publicly, I think the town manager's done a great job. And I think I said it before, and I'll say it again, not comparing him to Belichick, but, what would you do? Bob Kraft, we're Bob Kraft, and Bill Belichick decides to retire. You're going to look for another coach on the West Coast or down in Florida. You're going to look to one of his assistants. I'd look at one of his assistants, and I say that, and I think Mike has done a good job as our town manager, an outstanding job. And I look at you, Jeff, and I say, why not promote within? I've heard from people say, why would you want to hire the assistant town manager, do a nationwide search? And I wouldn't want to go through that route. That's myself personally. I'm really glad to see that the board decided to echo the sentiments that many of us feel. And I'm not speaking on behalf of the board. I think we all feel, and I'd like to hear from the other membership as well. But, obviously everything is subject to a contract. We need to sit down and, under your direction as chairman, on where we go relative to a contract. But that's the second step. And I show full support in hiring Jeff. I think he's the guy you give the job to. I mean, if you have why change something midstream if things are going good? I mean, you're there. You've been the town manager's right-hand man for a long time, and you know the players, you know the people involved, you know the organization. I mean, you don't have to bring someone up to speed if we hired someone outside, and that's how I see it. Being a person who owns his own business, and I appreciate the opportunity of speaking, and later on, maybe at another meeting, we entertain questions or however you want to do it, and how we proceed. So I just want to show a vote of confidence in Jeff as our next town manager. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from down here?
I'd just like to say that I certainly would go with the overall pleasure of the board. I certainly want to thank you for being here tonight. I know we had a previous meeting where we all conveyed unanimously our support for you as the chosen candidate to come forward, and certainly I respect the years of service that you have provided this town, and you've had many accomplishments during that time and have certainly been part of a larger team, and I appreciate your contributions. I do want to just put it out there just for purposes of this. I know that we're working with an internal candidate. I'm the newest member on the board, so I have not had the good fortune of working with you as long and in such a detailed capacity as maybe some other members of the board. And I also am thinking of the residents that are here and the residents that are at home that might want to hear a little bit more about you as a transitioning assistant town manager into a town manager role. So I did come prepared with questions, certainly not trying to put us through any sort of major formality, but things that would give an opportunity to express openly in an open forum as to how we might approach the coming months and transitioning into a new role. How we can possibly provide some information to residents and town employees, for that matter, at a very high level as to how you see yourself fitting into that leadership role and in transitioning in a most seamless capacity as possible for the benefit of the town and all of the employees.
Would you like to speak to that now?
Sure. I mean, it may be helpful for me to just give an overview of my background and how I came to Wilmington. I went to undergraduate school at Bryant University in Rhode Island, graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration, concentrated in public management. I served 4 months as an intern in the mayor's office in North Adams, Massachusetts, which is where I graduated from high school. And then I was hired by the town of Air, which is a town of about 6,500 people, Fort Devens, part of that area, as their administrative assistant. And this was back in 1983. At the time, a lot of communities were realizing that boards of selectmen could no longer run the town on a day-to-day basis, and they were looking for administrative support to essentially serve as the chief administrative officer. So that's really the role I filled. I was involved in the budget process, the collective bargaining, along with the Board of Selectmen, some grant writing and grant administration. Then in 1987, I was hired by former town manager Buzz Stepchinsky, and in the meantime, I had entered Northeastern University night school for my master's in public administration. I graduated with a degree, an MPA in public administration in 1988, came on board here in November of '87, and early on was involved in some grant writing. One of the first projects I was involved in, Patty Ward, the former town clerk, was wrapping up a grant on assessing the water quality at Silver Lake. I worked with her to finish that up, and then applied for a second grant along those lines to look at the water quality, get some recommendations on what we could do to try to preserve the quality of the lake. Put in for a couple of grants for management training, was successful there. And then in the late 1980s, worked with Bob Palmer and a group of very enthusiastic residents. You may recall we set up the recycling center, the drop-off center, which is located, or was located, where the current yard waste center is. Was involved during that time with collective bargaining and some of the purchasing. When the current town manager Mike Kyra came on in 1990, I continued to be involved in many of those activities, and to my great advantage, Mike has really brought me into many aspects of town government, certainly the budget process, the preparation of the budget. We've had countless discussions about approaches to different projects. So I'm quite familiar with that process, the interplay with the state in terms of state aid. Became more involved in the purchasing process and in terms of procuring goods and services and going through the bid process. In the mid-90s, I set up a safety committee because we were noticing that the town was experiencing a high number of work injuries and insurance losses. And through that effort and through developing some training programs, we received recognition from MAIA, the Massachusetts Interlocal Insurance Association, for our efforts to cut our losses, so to speak. And also was really privileged to be nominated and awarded the Eugene Rooney Award, was given to me by William Weld, former governor, which is an award that goes to honor state and local officials for distinguished service. In this case, it was for my efforts to, and certainly in conjunction with a lot of other employees, but to develop training programs that would address some of our insurance issues. I continued working on some of our insurance issues and began putting our insurance program out to bid. When I came here, it had been an extended period of time where the insurances, general liability, property, and auto had not been put out to bid. And one of the interesting effects of that, and we've done it periodically over the last 20 years, if you look at the appropriation for, or actually the expenditure for general liability, property, and casualty, in 1993, the town expended $592,000, a little bit over that. The budget that we have for this fiscal year 13 is $612,000 and change. So over the last 20 years, because of our efforts to put this out to bid on a regular basis and also engage in some loss control measures, the increase has been approximately 3.5%. So I think that's been a real a positive effort that we've had on the insurance front. I've started getting involved in the last 15-20 years in a number of different associations. The Mass Municipal Managers Association, I served there on their professional development committee. Again, that group offers training to managers. I served 4 years as the chairperson of the Massachusetts Municipal Personnel Association and was honored by that group in 2008 with the Emil Scopp Award, which is given to individuals in the human resources field who demonstrate a level of effort and excellence. On that, serving on that group as chair, we were putting programs together, professional development programs for human resource individuals in cities and towns across the state. So I was, again, very honored to receive that award. Continuing to this point, more recently, I have gone through a course of training and obtained my certification as a public procurement officer. The Inspector General's office encourages cities and towns to have individuals who are trained in the various procurement laws, Chapter 32B, Chapter 149, the Building Construction Law, Chapter 7. So in going through these courses and taking a series of exams, I was able to get my certification there and would expect to continue to maintain that certification. So I've certainly tried to broaden my experience over the last 22, 25 years, and again, and thanks to the town manager for allowing me to get involved in so many different aspects of town government here. I would say that certainly there are a number of individuals throughout the state and across the nation that are qualified to perform this job. I suspect have better academic credentials than I can offer and better experience perhaps than I can offer, certainly given the fact that I have not served as a town manager. But I would say that one of the benefits that I do bring to the table is the fact that having been here for almost 25 years, as Selectman McCoy pointed out, I do have a clear lay of the land. I know the process, the budgeting process, and clearly subscribe to the process that Mike Kyra has engaged in for the last 22 years of conservative budgeting, not spending what you don't have, not being over-optimistic in terms of state aid and other sources of revenue. That would be the approach that I would take, and certainly knowing the department heads, being familiar with the various groups in town. And I would also say that in spite of the fact that I do live in Billerica, it is East Billerica, so I'm just on the other side of the Shawsheen. I've suggested in the past that if there's any effort to annex East Billerica, I'd be supportive of that. But the fact is, having been here for so long, I also have personal connections to the town. I attend church in Wilmington. We have friends in Wilmington. My kids have friends in Wilmington. So it's beyond just a professional connection. I do have a connection to the community, attend the Fourth events. But most importantly, in terms of my background, I think I can offer the town certainly the dedication. I hope that my track record demonstrates the level of dedication, level of ethics and honesty. I've tried to convey that certainly in my time engaging with boards of selectmen and other committees and residents. So that's kind of, I guess, perhaps a bit of a long-winded explanation, but that's where I come from, and that's my story.
If we could go to Mr. Shampoo, and
other
then
people an opportunity.
we'll open it up to more questions.
I don't want to steal anyone's question, so I'll ask. I'll simply state that I think I'll restate something I had said at some meetings ago, that this job of ours as members of the Board of Selectmen in identifying and ultimately hiring the next town manager, I view as very possibly the most important thing that we will do. I said earlier that one of the most exciting and enjoyable things was signing the purchase and sale for the Ental Farm property, and I'll be very delighted to watch how the community makes use of that property for generations, and I'll be glad that I had a say in that. I am confident that I'll be as delighted going forward, watching the town flourish, hopefully under your leadership. So we're excited that you've come here tonight to talk to us about that. Your credentials are certainly impressive, and to me they illustrate your experience and your skills. I've been with you at a number of the MMA conferences, and especially when I was a newly elected selectman, I went there and my eyes were wide open. I was just trying to be a sponge and absorb information, and I witnessed firsthand that you were perceived by your colleagues as a thought leader, as an expert in subject matters that were being discussed there, particularly around the insurance issues. But it was very clear to me that through the decades, you had acquired a high level of respect from your colleagues in other communities. So that spoke very highly to me, and it implanted in me. For all intents and purposes, I don't feel the need to go through a grueling interview process with you. I think you've kind of been on a 25-year interview and have answered the questions along the way. The one question I guess I would want to lob out there is, you mentioned something about conservative budgeting style vis-a-vis the way Mike Kyra has sort of developed a plan for operating the finances of the town over the past 22 years. I like to call them Kyronomics. But the thought I have is, it was music to my ears to hear you say that you would adhere or subscribe to a similar style, and that's a positive. I guess what I would say is, do you have a strategy, or have you given any thought to how you will establish your own voice, your own, presence, your own style, so to speak, to the role? Obviously, Mr. Kyra has his personality and his style. and it has served him and the town very well, and you will have to find your voice. And have you given that some thought to how you'll get out into the community and make your presence known as the town manager?
To some degree, certainly, if I were to be given the opportunity to serve as town manager, the immediate issues would involve transitional issues and dealing with some of the issues at hand, the school project and so on. With respect to the department heads, I would expect to have a very inclusive style of management, essentially much like Mike Kyra does now, an open door policy. If people need to come in with an issue, that would be my approach. With respect to direction, I would certainly have expectations of department heads, but then not be looking to micromanage their departments. They're all professionals and would expect that they give them the latitude to do the work that they do best, and certainly have far more knowledge about than I do. With respect to the community, I would expect to be at various events, certainly to the extent that I'm invited to speak at different in different settings. I would welcome that opportunity just to become more known. As much time as I put into this job, I fully expect, based upon knowing the amount of time and effort that Mike Kyra puts into this job, that I'll have to kick it up a notch in that respect. So, that is something I'm prepared to do.
Thank you. That's all I had to say. Thank you, Jeff.
I have a couple of comments and then a question for you. As far as comments go, one of the things that I've noticed in my time as a selectman in the past is that two of the elements of the job that you're, I think, particularly effective with are the kinds of things that managers have always had to be effective doing, and that's handling the budget process and dealing with collective bargaining. And so I think that you've always demonstrated acumen in those fields, and obviously you'll continue to need to be able to do that. The other thing that I've noticed is that you seem to have taken much of the burden from the manager in terms of human resources and personnel matters, and also taken a large share of the load in terms of public procurement. And it seems to me that those areas have evolved during your tenure as assistant town manager and during Mike's tenure as manager, and that's probably at least part of the reason why he seems to have relied on you so much in those areas. They've gotten more complicated, frankly. Human resources and personnel, I imagine, 25, 30 years ago was a much simpler game to play, and it seems that it's constantly getting more complicated, and I've noticed that you're always on top of those developments, and so I certainly recognize that and appreciate those abilities. The other thing that I would say is that to add to the things that you referenced as being assets of yours, talked about knowing the lay of the land, being familiar with the budget process, and having a conservative budgeting style, etc. One of the things that you didn't mention that I certainly want to mention is the fact that you're familiar with important matters affecting the town right now, and as capable as some other folks might be, as impressive as their degrees might be for other folks who might be interested in the position. From my perspective, no matter how qualified or capable a person is, there's a learning curve getting to know what the heck's going on. And you've been integrally involved in important matters such as the Entile Farm acquisition and prospective reuse and the high school project. So, and the list goes on and on. I know you've been very involved in the Maple Meadow landfill, for example, which we've not, had a lot. It hasn't made a lot of news recently, but certainly those are matters that are going to continue to affect the town over time. So I just wanted to offer those comments because in my mind they reinforce for me what Mr. McCoy had said earlier and what I've said, essentially the same thing, is the fact that it would be disingenuous for me to talk about starting a nationwide process to try and identify the best applicant for the job. I believe we already have that person here. With that said, though, I do have a question for you that I think is always interesting to learn, especially from somebody who's been around and who's familiar with the town and what we're working on, and that's what your perspective is on doing things differently. Recognizing that there's always room for improvement, and that nobody runs the perfect operation. If you could speak to that and just offer any thoughts you have in that regard.
Sure. But you talked about the human resources piece of the program, and clearly that has become a field, an area for municipalities that has become more and more important with the various federal laws and state laws, whether it's Family Medical Leave Act or Maternity Act, all these various laws that have been put in place in more recent years. Somebody needs to manage those various requirements and make sure we're in compliance. One of the things that I would like to see us take a look at is whether we can perform those responsibilities more effectively through perhaps some consolidation of some of those duties with personnel in the town manager's office. Right now, some of those responsibilities are spread amongst many. If again given the opportunity to serve as the town manager, one of the first things obviously that would need to happen is to hire an assistant town manager. I would be looking to hire someone that has a great level of HR experience. One of the things that I think we should also be looking to do, which is actually part of the budget currently, is to fill a part-time position in the manager's office. It was a secretarial position that was full-time up until a couple of years ago, and we've have not filled that position. But I would like to give some serious consideration to designating that person to deal with some of the benefits issues that can be very time-consuming. So I think reorienting who is involved in the HR would be one area. Another area that I would like to take a look at is whether it continues to make sense to use essentially recycle the police cruisers into use by department heads. Would it make sense for us to purchase more energy efficient vehicles for department heads? That's another area that I would like to take a look at. Continuing with our efforts to, again, looking at energy issues, because I think that's a cost, we certainly need to continue to be mindful of other areas that we can make savings in terms of energy use within the buildings. As you know, we've done the window project at the Shawsheen. We're slated to do a project at the North. I would look to identify other buildings where we can tighten up the building envelope, so to speak, and look at other ways that we can make the buildings more energy efficient. One of the other areas that I would like to, again, take a look at, and I don't have any definitive answers at this point, but whether there are opportunities that we're not currently taking advantage of in terms of technology. The cost, this is something I would look at, is the cost of online bill paying for real estate bills. Does that make sense? What are the costs involved? Those are some of the things that I would take a look at.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to touch upon a comment, and I'll ask a question. You said something about how Mike Kyra has always taken a conservative approach, and I'm glad to hear that you will take that. But serving on the board for a few years, past members and present members have always directed the town manager to take a conservative approach. And town manager knows the numbers better than I, and he has done that. And that's obviously a message that we need to send, say, to you, and it has worked out. You look at other communities, and I'll even say Tewksbury have never really done that, and they've got disaster over there. That's one. The other point I'd like to mention is that the three most important positions that we can make under the town charter is the appointment of the town council, town accountant, and the town manager. I think personally the most important is obviously appointing the town manager, because he is basically our eyes and ears that are here. I mean, we can't be here every day. This is really a part-time position for us, and we really count on the TM in doing a good job. And Mike has done a great job, and I think you'll do an equal job. The most important task you can as town manager, obviously, is the next, obviously, appointing department heads. For example, I think the town manager did a good choice in appointing the chief of police and other department heads, and I would assume that you'd be doing that as well. But you mentioned, I wrote it here, the assistant TM, just to show here. You mentioned about, obviously, the most important position that you're going to make is the appointment of a assistant town manager. And just a few thoughts. I know you touched upon it. Do you see anybody, and I just asked this, I put that out, do you see anybody maybe in the town hall? Or do you see somebody that works in the town that maybe would be and have an opportunity that you might think that that individual may make a good assistant town manager? I'm not asking you to name anybody. Obviously, when the point in time comes, that's your decision, but obviously that's the most important decision you're going to make as the town manager, as it's our decision to make you the town manager. Your thoughts?
I do, in fact. That's there's individuals that I would consider. I don't want to really go beyond that, but certainly, again, to the extent, I think the philosophy of promoting from within, where it's possible and appropriate, is advantageous from a number of perspectives, because first of all, you have someone who is familiar with the community and the workings of the operation, whatever that operation might be. I think it also creates an incentive for those individuals who are working here that, gee, I might have an opportunity down the line for, a different position of greater responsibility. So I would certainly subscribe to that.
Just like to make one point. I don't know how good Mike Kyra's memory is, but as a rookie selectman in the 80s, I got up at the town meeting, and he may remember, maybe not, under the town manager budget, there was a budget by Buzz, an assistant town manager. I got up at the town meeting to delete that money, to take away. We didn't think we needed a higher assistant town manager. But however, the people at town meeting voted to support Buzz Stepchinsky and make an appropriation. And that's one vote that I'm glad they made, because you wouldn't be here today. And I think the town meeting did the right thing. And I'll admit, hey, I was wrong in that, and the town meeting was right. And now you're going to be the next town manager. And I just thought I'd share that. Mike was the moderator at the time, but I remember it well. That was one of the things that I did, and I'm glad it didn't happen. And I'll admit that. Thank you.
Questions or comments down here?
I just have another question. The municipal side of the town has enjoyed and fostered a very productive working relationship with the entire Wilmington public school system, from the superintendent of schools on through the director of administration and finance, and the list goes on. I know you've been a part of this process in your current role. I'd like for you to share with this board, as well as the residents that may be listening here and at home, in your prospective new role as town manager, what will you do to see that this critically important relationship continues on a positive and productive path? And if you'd like to comment specifically about the high school project, perhaps some of the capital improvements that you've already touched upon, special education and things of that nature, certainly would appreciate that.
There's no question that that is a critical relationship. When I was working in the town of Air many years ago, and quite honestly, when I first started in the town of Wilmington, I saw how difficult it can be when the school department and general government kind of operate as two entities fighting for the limited pie. Fortunately, for the last 20-plus years, I think in large measure through Mike's efforts, there's been an incredibly cooperative relationship, and that would be very important to me, and I think it starts with regular communication. One of the first things I would certainly do on my to-do list, so to speak, if given the opportunity to serve as town manager, would be to talk to Joanne, get a sense of what her expectations of me are, and discuss with her my expectations, and really look to establish a good working relationship. The old adage of no surprises, I think that certainly goes miles towards fostering a productive relationship. We need to know what's going on in the school department. They need to know what's happening on the general government side, so there aren't any surprises. With respect to the school, clearly this is, in my estimation, the most important project that we're dealing with right now, and I would continue to be in close consultation with Joanne Benton, the superintendent, about that. But even beyond the working relationship at that level, and one of the things that's really been advantageous for us is that it goes to the Director of Administration and Finance, Paul Ruggiero, has been incredibly cooperative, and I would expect to foster that continued relationship. I think it involves communication. That's certainly the first element of it. You've got to be talking with each other on a regular basis. In terms of the budget process, as has been the past practice here, certainly the last 20-plus years, have conversations with the school department about what we're looking to do in terms of funding for school building maintenance projects, get input from the superintendent and the Director of Admin and Finance. I think that's what I would expect to do.
Thank you.
I'm good. I have no more questions. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay. Before opening the discussion to any motions, just like to first go to the audience. However, I want to make it clear, this is a public meeting that's intended to be open and transparent and viewable by everyone who cares to either watch on television or to be here. But it's not an interview of a candidate by the general public. So before going to the audience, I'll just ask if anybody has any questions about the process. Would be happy to answer those questions. If you have any questions about the role of the town manager, would be happy to answer those questions. And then perhaps we can go back to the board to see if the board wants to, see if anybody wants to offer a motion. So with that, do we have, yes, Mr. Lingenfelter.
George Lingenfelter, 11 Concord Street. I don't really have any specific questions, but I did have some comments that I might like to ask that the Board of Selectmen consider moving forward. I've always gotten along with Jeff, fine, and I don't have any specific objections. My questions are more to the transition from town employee to town manager, and I speak from ignorance. I know that I believe the town manager isn't technically an employee. I think he has a separate retirement fund that the town makes the annual contribution to, and perhaps Jeff as a town employee, is a different setup, and with 20 years in, I just wanted to express interest in the transition process. Without any specific question tonight, right. I'd like to see some kind of a transition process that was amiable to both sides. And also, if you do go in the direction of hiring Jeff, to me it would be helpful that Jeff would express an interest in not wanting to just come in for 3 years and look for retirement and that kind of thing. To, if he was going to come on board, in the tradition of the long-term town managers, that he'd be interested in staying around for a while, And so those, like I say, no specific question, just general comments of my concern for the transition. I just wanted to throw it out there for your consideration when you go on your deliberations.
Thank you. Two points I would make in response to those comments. Number one would be if the board does proceed and vote to appoint Mr. Hull as the next town manager. First of all, I would expect that it would specifically reflect that he would assume that position upon the last actual date of employment, working employment by the manager. Secondly, in terms of retirement and pensions and that kind of thing, we will certainly consult with counsel on everything, but I think it's important to note for the general public that there would be no double dipping of retirement. That couldn't happen and won't happen, but your point is well made and well received.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so we're certainly cognizant of that. But there is, I would assure people that the board, if it makes an appointment, would be subject to what I had just indicated, and secondly, would be subject to negotiating a contract, and that's our opportunity to make sure that the board deals with those kinds of things. And that contract would ultimately become available to the public after we do that.
Could I address the second part of that, of Mr. Lingenfelter's questions? Mr. Lingenfeld, you brought up, you wanted, none of us asked the question of Mr. Hull, what's his intentions? Do we hope that he'll stay on for, hopefully another 10, 15, maybe 20 years, who knows? It didn't occur to me to ask that question because, frankly, he's already demonstrated longevity in the assistant job. I couldn't foresee, and I suppose it's not an invalid question, but I wouldn't deem it necessary to ask the question, given his 25 years of service to this town, very good service to the town. It doesn't seem likely that he would grab the town manager job for 3 years and then jump ship. So it doesn't strike me as the kind of character that he is, and it would be freakishly surprised if that kind of thing were to come to pass. So it didn't occur to me to ask the question. It still doesn't occur to me to ask the question. I don't think it's necessary.
I didn't mean that in a derogatory. It was just strict curiosity type. I wasn't trying to be, adversarial at all. So.
No, I recognize. I hope I didn't come across being adversarial either. That was why I didn't go into the thought process of considering that question. Is frankly, I didn't feel like the question was necessary, and I still don't.
Certainly speak to that if you'd like. As has been mentioned, the fact that I've been here for 25 years, the fact is that I like working for the town. The people that I've grown to know over the years as colleagues, their expertise and so on. It's a good environment. The Board of Selectmen, unlike some other communities, but the Board of Selectmen in Wilmington seems to have a real understanding of the town manager form of government and engages the town manager in discussions about policies and dealing with issues, but ultimately leaves it to the town manager to implement the will of the board, and I think that's incredibly important. So quite honestly, as long as the board believes I'm, if I were to be selected, doing the job that they expect me to do, I don't really have any intention of going anywhere. I certainly don't have any intention of retiring right away. I've got 2 boys that will be going to college, so I'll be spending 8 years of paying for college for 8 years. So, and the fact is I'm rooted here at this point, even though it's East Billerica and not West Wilmington. I'm here to stay.
And I perhaps should have been more clear on my response to you, to Mr. Lingenfelter. I had the sense you were asking about, kind of the double dipping of pensions that you hear about in the news. And when I assure you that it won't happen, the other point I should have been very black and white about is that the manager is, in fact, an employee of the town that's in the same retirement system. You're correct. insofar as the town manager has a contract which defines some of the other aspects of his employment compensation package, but it is the same retirement system, and I should have been more clear about that.
I just thought it was a little different, and I just was throwing it out there as consideration. That's,
I appreciate it, because somebody else probably had the same question in mind.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, just make a quick comment. I'd be happy to make a motion when the time comes, but I'm going to need a little guidance, obviously. I mean, simply put, I'm sure there's going to be some critics out there saying that the board didn't do the right thing or whatever. Hey, 25 years, has he paid his dues? I would say yes, he's paid his dues and he hung in there. And I don't think the guy's going anywhere. And that says a lot. You know, when someone has actually been on the job for 25 years, that speaks volumes. And the other thing, Mr. Chairman, if I can mention, obviously I'd be happy to entertain a motion to appoint Jeff as the town manager. And I just say this now, obviously, we need to negotiate a contract. I would hope to think that we can come up with a contract before the end of the year and do that. I feel confident that we can. I just need to ask Mike, the manager, just help me with this. I know we make the appointments for 3 years, and I'm glad it is 3 years. Now, obviously you're retiring. What is that date of retirement? Do we make the I would assume we make the motion on the day of retirement that he becomes the TM. And is it in the you know better than I, in the town charter, is it a specific time for the 3 years, like May to May, or is it any 3 years, like say September 10th, for example? It says September 10th, 3 years after. Is that?
You asking?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if you could.
There's no set time period. So you could do it January or May to May, or as we've done, July 1 to June 30. There's no set time period.
No.
I would suggest that Jeff be appointed the town manager on my last active day of employment.
That's why I was trying to ask you, when would that last day
The
be?
last active day would be September 30.
September what, Michael?
September 30th.
September 30th.
Which is a Sunday, but I will give me time to take the pictures off the wall that weekend and leave my key on the desk.
Just 1 second.
And before we do open it up to a motion, I think your name's been used in vain a few times here tonight. Do you have anything that you want to offer or respond to?
Well, it's clear to me that in my judgment anyways, that the Board of Selectmen is moving in the right direction. Obviously, if I didn't have confidence in Jeff, he wouldn't still be here. I mean, it's the town manager is given the authority to hire folks and retain folks who he believes are doing a job that's in the best interest of the town of Wilmington, and I certainly think that Jeff has been doing that. Also, he has my unequivocal endorsement. He's ready to be the town manager. He's been ready for many, many years to be a town manager. I think we're very fortunate that he's not taking the opportunities that have been given to him over the years to go to other communities. I know personally I'm very grateful for that and for the relationship that we've had. He touched on a few of the honors that he's received over the years in almost a passive way, but they certainly have been outstanding achievements, particularly in the area of human resources with the Emil Scott Award and the Eugene Rooney Award. Eugene Rooney was a person who was a longtime deputy personnel administrator in the state, who I knew very well, going back to my days when I worked for the Commonwealth, who died at a tragic young age many, many years ago, and they honor a municipal leader in that field each year, and Jeff was one of those who was honored. I mean, he's been selected by his peers at the MMPA, the Massachusetts Municipal Personnel Association, as its president. He neglected to tell you that he serves as a management representative on the Joint Labor Management Committee, and that he has chaired a number of ad hoc committees and activities for the town over the years, and he's never said no to me. Anytime that I've asked him to step forward and take on an important role, he's done that. So I think you couldn't be making a better choice if you decide to appoint Jeff. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to it.
With that, do we have any other questions, comments, or a motion?
I'd be happy to entertain a motion on Mr. Chairman, and if this would be appropriate, I'd like to make a motion that we promote the Assistant Town Manager, Jeff Hull, to the position of Permanent Town Manager effective October 1st, 2012 through October 1st, 2015, obviously subject to a contract. Be happy to entertain that, Mr. Chairman, and if that's the appropriate language.
I think that does a trick. We'll accept that as a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Anything further on that motion? All in favor? It's unanimous with 4 in favor and 1 abstention. Congratulations on that vote.
Thank you very much.
I gotta abstain.
And we'll be in touch relative to transition and your game plan and what's next relative to filling the assistant town manager's position. Thank you. We could proceed with communications.
Mr. Chairman, going to the next order is a memorandum from Charles Boyle, the Chairman of the Board of Appeals, to Matthew Middlestat of EA Fish Development regarding the application for the comprehensive permit at 10 Burlington Avenue, which is now known as Metro at Wilmington Station. It's formerly referred to as both Crystal Commons and Legacy Park. He is advising Mr. Middlestat that the Board of Appeals at their meeting on May 9th voted that the changes to the comprehensive permit issued in the above referenced matter as described in his letter of April 25th, a copy of which is provided to the board, were deemed by the board to be insubstantial changes, and therefore the permit was deemed modified to incorporate said changes. And they were insignificant changes, as a matter of fact, changes that probably, in my estimation anyways, enhancing the project. Things like adding stone veneer to building elevations, making minor adjustments to the building footprints, but staying within the 10% size reduction, which means it'll be actually a little larger. Relocating building entrances, adding a stairway to link the sidewalk on Burlington Avenue to the MBTA platform, improving the entryway, adding outdoor amenity space in the form of a patio, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the kinds of things that were changed. There's no major changes, and certainly we're in agreement with the Board of Appeals. Bring this to the board's attention because they've been involved so intimately in the permitting process for this project. The board has correspondence from the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization regarding a meeting that is taking place to discuss long-range transportation plans. There are 2 meetings, one in Boston on June 12th and one at the Woburn City Hall on June 6th. And again, they will be presenting information about their long-range transportation plan if anybody is interested in attending. The board has correspondence from Mary Freer of Verizon indicating that at some point on or after July 16th, CNBC World Channel 106 will no longer be available on the Verizon Fios TV Premier and Extreme HD channel lineups. Again, they are required to send this to the board as licensing authority, and they will send out this information to all of their subscribers. The board's being asked to consider issuing a final approval on the Class 2 license to Hussam El Habre Naya Inc., doing business as ZNS Gas and Service for property located at 603 Main Street. You will recall at the last meeting, the board voted to issue the license subject to a final sign-off from the fire department. The fire department has, and a copy has been provided to you in a memorandum on May 24th, no objection issuing the Class 2 garage license at that location, as all of the previous issues have been resolved. And again, those issues were technical in nature. They've already had the approval of the others. So I believe, and I certainly can be stand corrected. I believe the board has already voted for this, but because of the dates, I asked that we bring it back for the board's signatures, so I'm not sure it requires another vote. Up to you.
Yeah, I think, well, actually, if we have a motion, perhaps we can just entertain a motion to execute the license and authorize its release.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. Anything further? All in favor? That's unanimous.
Okay. And then, thank you. The board is being asked to consider their summer meeting schedule. This is typically the meeting that we request the board to consider whether they want to continue as in the past, meeting just once in July and once in August, whether they want to maintain the two-meeting schedule. The suggested dates are based upon what we've done in the past. We've typically met in and around these times. July 16th and August 13th, but certainly that's the decision of the board. Those dates are presented to the board after consulting with the chairman.
Do you have any objections to either one of those dates?
I have no objection to the dates. Has it not been customary that if we find ourselves with material to be deliberated on or discussed, we have an ad hoc meeting as necessary?
Correct. That has been the case. If the need for a meeting becomes urgent in any way, we can call a meeting and meet all the open meeting requirements and publicize beyond that the way we typically do. Hearing no objections, then that's will be our intention to call the meetings on those dates.
And, Mr. Chairman, we would still have the two meetings in June as discussed.
Yes.
Right. That concludes the regular business before the board.
Public comments? Seeing none, we'll move to new business and committee reports. And unless there's any objection from the board, I would actually like to deviate from custom and begin that discussion because of a specific matter of importance to the town, which is late breaking and which typically would have been included in our communications section of the agenda, but just simply there wasn't enough time to do that. As members of the board are aware, and as the general public, many folks in the general public are aware, the notice of intent that had been filed with the Wilmington Conservation Commission, pursuant to which an order of conditions had been issued by the Conservation Commission, has been appealed by way of two different mechanisms. There is one appeal by 10 residents and another appeal by a single abutter. I have, and I know that we've disseminated to the board just prior to the meeting, a correspondence addressed to the town by way of the town manager from Niche Engineering, who's the engineering firm that with whom the town consulted and who essentially carried the ball through the permitting process through the Wilmington Conservation Commission. I'd like to take this opportunity to read into the record and for the benefit of the general public correspondence from Niche Engineering. Prior to doing that, let me just say a quick word about the process. At this point, since the decision of the Conservation Commission has been appealed, the appeal is filed with the Department of Environmental Protection. This first level of appeal, if you will, is largely an administrative process, and one of the important steps in DEP issuing an order relative to the appeal is to conduct a site visit. A site visit, even though the appeal had been filed just this previous Friday, just this past Friday, a site visit has in fact been scheduled for June 7th. And it's certainly not intended as any kind of knock on DEP and how they do business to say that it usually doesn't happen that fast. I think it's a positive sign that the department recognizes that this is an issue of importance to the town, both in terms of the services, the educational services specifically that we provide, and in terms of the town's financial commitment to a very sizable project. It's my intention to have council and Niche update the Board of Selectmen, either in executive session or open session, depending on advice of council, in the near future after the June 7th site visit. And in terms of how information flows, since the High School Building Committee is the committee that is charged with the responsibility of overseeing that project, the flow of information is typically to that committee, and then the town manager obviously takes that information and provides it to the Board of Selectmen. So in really less than one business day, all of that has occurred, and we fully expect to be able to update the public as things proceed. With that said, I'd like to read the correspondence that's before us. It is, as I indicated, dated today, May 29th. It's addressed to Mr. Kyra, and it reads as follows. Niche Engineering received copies of the appeals to the order of conditions issued by the Wilmington Conservation Commission for the new high school located on the existing high school site at 159 Church Street in Wilmington, Massachusetts. Niche Engineering has reviewed the narrative included in the appeal from the 10 concerned citizens and Mr. O'Reilly, who parenthetically is the abutter that appealed. As professional engineers licensed by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, in our professional opinion, the town's notice of intent submittal for the project not only met the requirements set forth under the Wetlands Protection Act and its regulations 310 CMR 10, but exceeded them. Niche Engineering also believes that the town and design team made every effort to work with the community and put forward a design that meets the programming needs of the high school while being sensitive to the wetland resource areas located on and adjacent to the site. The following is a list of improvements and efforts that were included in the NOI submittal or provided at one of the 2 public hearings. New high school, and then there are a list of bullet points that were just referenced. The new high school will be a U.S. Green Building Council Leadership in Environmental and Energy Design (LEED) for schools project, and the project was designed to meet the stormwater credentials under the LEED rating system. As a result, the proposed stormwater recharge systems and stormwater quality treatments exceed those required by the Department of Environmental Protection stormwater standards and the Wilmington's stormwater bylaw. The proposed design stormwater management system provides a substantial improvement over the existing drainage system. In response to the concerns expressed during the previous appeal of the football field, filed separately but withdrawn and then combined with the high school submission, the existing 30-inch drainage pipe that serves the abutting streets and discharges directly into the wetland will now be daylighted, or in other words, removed, and the area of the existing bus loop will be restored to a natural state. Although the area was previously designated to be restored by planting, the area of restoration was increased, and the drainage pipe being daylighted or removed was included in the NOI submission. The overflow parking lot and the bullpens for the baseball field were relocated outside of the 200-foot riverfront area. The daylighted drainage pipe will also provide pre-treatment of drainage from the abutting streets. This enhancement is a side benefit of the daylighting and is not required. In response to the concerns expressed during the previous appeal of the football field, the existing creosote railroad tie retaining along the baseball outfield and at the bordering vegetated wetlands will be removed and replaced with a vegetated reinforced slope that will be relocated an additional 5 feet further away from the BVW. Members of the design team met with the concerned citizens group known as the Headwaters Stream Team to better understand their concerns and describe what was included in the design of the site and how the design was enhancing and protecting the wetland resource areas. During the public hearing, the town volunteered to use porous pavement at the proposed Wildwood Field parking lot instead of the proposed traditional impervious pavement and bioretention area to reduce the amount of tree cutting near the vernal pool within the isolated land subject to flooding adjacent to the proposed Wildwood Field. The project will maintain a 15-foot setback at the vernal pool and a 25-foot setback during construction for the proposed construction staging area. The route of the construction access was adjusted in response to concerns expressed during the public hearing. The design team provided electronic files of the filing to the public for ease of reviewing the submitted information. This is not required under the regulations, but was provided at the request of the town in an effort to have transparency for the project and process. The town agreed to sequence the off-site mitigation to potentially reduce the amount of work on Nathan Road in response to concerns of the abutters. In Niche Engineering's opinion, based on having permitted many projects in the Commonwealth, the town has consistently responded to the concerns of the Conservation Commission and the community in providing an appropriate design of the new high school while protecting and even enhancing the protection of the wetland resource areas on the site. Niche Engineering is confident the submitted site design for the project provides the appropriate protection of the wetland resource areas required under the Wetlands Protection Act. Niche Engineering will continue to work with all stakeholders in the DEP to resolve the appeal as quickly as possible. Since Niche Engineering has been engaged by the town and provided its services through this permitting process, I can appreciate the fact that their position is that they have confidence not only in substantively what's been permitted, but in the process, and they certainly express imminent confidence in their ability to deal with this appeal. Having said that, quite simply, I think that it's fair to say they expect a favorable decision by DEP. They have, through the town manager, asked that we consult with both Niche Engineering and I'm suggesting also council to ensure that we don't say or do anything that might be counterproductive during the appeals process. But certainly I do not want to take away the, with that caution in mind, do not want to take away the board's ability to offer comment. I would just say that I know that the board, and based on the comments that I've received over the weekend, I know people feel very strongly about this issue, and I think we will need to take care of business on the appeal. I believe that we'll take care of business on the appeal, and we certainly will have time to express our opinion about the appeal. With that, I think it's important to at least open it up to the board if anybody has any additional comment.
I have a question. I don't know if it's prudent to ask it or not, but especially given what you just said, I recognize we want to let this process play out. That being said, I don't feel like I have a strong grasp on what is being appealed. We've been through this process. We believed when I say we, the town, my understanding was that the town had worked diligently and hand in hand with those that had filed the first appeal. And I was of the mind that, especially given the nature of everything that Niche Engineering just said, that we had rectified any causes for appeal. So is it prudent for me to ask a question as to what the appeal is appealing now?
Absolutely a fair question, but I would say this. I would say that the appeal document itself is rather lengthy with the attachments. That is a matter of public record with DEP. I know that the town manager will be providing full copies to any selectman who wants to review it, and certainly our consultants have already begun its review and are already proceeding with advancing the town's interest by way of the appeal. And I know it's not a direct answer to your question, but I think it's a fair question that a lot of residents are asking, and I would say this. 10 residents of the Commonwealth of Mass, 10 residents of the town, it used to be the Commonwealth of Mass, 10 residents of the town have the standing to pay a $200 filing fee and file an appeal with DEP. As an abutter to the property, one also has the ability to avail himself or herself of that same appeals process. To the substance of the appeal, I think it's wouldn't do it justice for me to try and characterize what the appellants believe is their case, but certainly their case is spelled out in that appeals document.
You said it. There are residents that are questioning what's going on. We thought this was done. Questioning me, I suspect questioning you, especially over the course of the weekend with all the public events going on. So I'm hopeful and anxious that DEP and the town, working with Niche and our other consultants, will be able to bring this to closure sooner than later, so that the residents can see that we'll start delivering on the promise that we made to them in their votes over the course of the special town election, as well as the special town meeting, where they said that they wanted this project. So thank you, Mr. Newhouse.
Mr. Chairman, if we made a comment about the individuals that make the appeal, do we jeopardize our case at all? Or I mean, I'm going to sit back and not say nothing, but I would love to say a few things, to be totally honest with you. But I'm willing to hold back on that when the appropriate time comes, because I'm not happy, and I think a lot of individuals out there aren't happy, and we're not happy. When was the last time, and I've served on this board for a while, unanimous support from the school committee, Board of Selectmen, to support a capital project? It was the last, I believe, it was the middle school. There's a mandate out there. People voted in support of that. Individuals out there, I would love to make a comment, didn't support it. However, very minor, but there's a mandate out there. People wanted this. And I think the big losers are going to be the children of this community. But I would love to say something about these individuals, but I'd be willing to hold back until the appropriate time.
I think the comment you just made was well made.
I'll just leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else?
I'm hopeful that the process will see itself through and that will come out on the prevailing side. I just want to express the fact that I was quite surprised to learn of the information. I was actually at the last Conservation Commission meeting, and spokesperson from the group of citizens was very complimentary of the town and the giving consultants, and felt that everything was answered effectively, and additional information was provided beyond what was requested in a very usable manner. I know the town manager and even the people that were present made changes to the design as late as even at that meeting. So I feel that, in my opinion, what I visually saw in person was that there was a positive exchange between both groups, and that there was a meeting of the minds. And just want to express the fact that I was rather surprised to receive the information, and I have every faith in the manager and the team that's been assembled and hired to do this project. And I would like to know going forward if any updates might become available, and if there's anything I can do as a tax-paying resident and or as a member of this board. Don't hesitate to call upon me. I would be right there to do whatever I can to help us move forward for the betterment of the children and for all of the residents that have said unanimously that they want this to happen. So thank you.
Appreciate all the comments that have been made. I happen to agree with every point that has been raised by the board. As the board's designee to the high school building committee, I would also add one point, and that's that, in my estimation, the town, acting through its administrative people, through the committee, and through its consultants, has made every effort not only to meet and exceed its obligations under the law, but notwithstanding that, to do everything reasonable to try and avoid an appeal. And so I think the bottom line for the Board of Selectmen is, I believe that the board has done everything it can do and will continue to do so, and we'll just stay the course.
Very good.
Anything else?
No, I got nothing.
Okay. And I appreciate the indulgence of starting off new business and committee reports. Do we have anything further for new business or committee reports?
I just wanted to acknowledge the special events that took place yesterday in honoring Memorial Day. Certainly, it was an honorable day. So many people and local organizations came out for the parade and also to go down to the commemorative cemetery service. I think it was very fitting that the town and all of the personnel and residents and people that wanted to join in remembering the men and women that have certainly died while serving our country in the United States Armed Forces. So I do appreciate the efforts of the Veterans Agent, as well as all of the town personnel. I know police and fire and a lot of other organizations were present, and I just wanted to say thank you very much for putting that together, Lou, and the total team effort with the town to see that that took place. Certainly was a nice event, so thank you.
Yeah, my only comments were that as well. Just everyone, the residents, Wilmington represented itself well again, as you always do at these type of events. So thank you and congratulations, and thank you, Lou, for putting together another very moving day. It's a lot of fun. The parade is a big celebration, but it's followed by a very moving ceremony at the cemetery, and it's a weird kind of juxtaposition, but I actually look forward to being there and listening to the somber words by all of the speakers, you, Mr. Newhouse, Mr. Kyra, some of the other legislative folks that came, as well as some of the veterans and some of the young people that do their speeches as well. It's a good day. The cemetery looks beautiful, and it shows again Wilmington at its best. So thank you all for coming out and for enjoying a beautiful day. I hope you all enjoyed it as well.
Important dates.
Just to let folks have a reminder that the Recreation Department's Fishing Derby will be Saturday, June 2nd at the town beach from 9 a.m. to noon. The Boy Scout Troop 136 on that same day will be having their yard sale fundraiser at the 4th of July parking lot from 9 to 3. Wilmington High School will graduate on Sunday, June 3rd, and the 2012 class at Shawshing Tech will graduate on Thursday, June 7th. Remind folks that the town beach opens, although we've had lots of activity down there. The town beach opens officially on June 9th, where it will be staffed by lifeguards from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. On June 10th, WCTV's open house, you recall that Mrs. Curtin was here last meeting, will be held. All are invited. It's free of charge from 1 to 4 p.m. on Sunday, June 10th at the WCTV headquarters on Waltham Street. Also on that same day, for anybody interested, the Herndon Tavern, through the Historical Commission, will be holding their Summer Fun preview from 2 to 4 p.m. The board's next meeting is June 11th, and just advance notice on the flag retirement ceremony at Minuteman headquarters on June 14th. The Wilmington Relay for Life will be held this year at Shawshing Tech beginning Friday afternoon, June 15th, and going through Saturday morning. And the Council for the Arts 32nd Annual Art Exhibition takes place on the 16th and 17th of June.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Seconded, all in favor? It's unanimous.